Erica here from ericakittyhouse.com, and I wanted to talk to you guys today about something I get asked about constantly from my readers and friends, and that is what it's like being a college professor, basically. Technically, I'm not a professor, I'm an adjunct, so I don't get that fancy title. But how I got into it was I started teaching when I was a graduate student at the University of West Florida. And if you're a graduate student in any program, not just psychology, if you're lucky, you can get an assistantship, which implies that you're going to exchange a certain amount of work, usually either teaching or being a teaching assistant or research assistant, in exchange for a small stipend and tuition waivers. So when I started the graduate program, I found out that I got an assistantship, which I was really excited about. And then I found out that it was teaching a class, which I wanted to crawl into a hole and die and never come out again because I never wanted to be a teacher, ever. I grew up, as most people do, and as my students still are now, absolutely deathly afraid of public speaking. And I, to this day, am so grateful that I was forced to do it because it has opened up so many opportunities for me, and I love it now. But I started when I was in graduate school at 23, which was way more impressive when I told people I taught college classes at 23 than it is now, because I'm 29, so I've been teaching for, it's going into my 7th year. But I remember vividly the very first semester I taught, and I was petrified every single day before class. It was a experimental psych lab course I ended up teaching for a couple of years. And the very first semester, I sat in the front of class with my notes in my hand, probably shaking. I broke out in hives regularly, and I just had to get over it. It sucked. It was really bad. And my mentor at the time sat in the class every single day to watch me and make sure I knew what I was doing. And I always remember exactly where he sat at. And eventually the weeks went by and it got a little bit less painful. And now, 7 years later, I love it. And I can speak fairly fluently in front of people. So that's how I got into teaching, was being forced at first. And then afterwards, I started working in academic advising at a different college, and then I started teaching at that same college, and now that's what I've been doing basically full-time, even though I'm still just an adjunct, so I don't actually get full-time benefits or anything. So then what do I teach? One of the classes I teach, drugs and behavior. This class was the very first one I taught at my current school, and it was really interesting because it changed my mind on a lot of things. It's really about how addiction affects not just the addict, obviously, but really the family, and we look particularly at alcoholism. Prior to teaching this course, I probably would have ignorantly said that the worst drug ever was, cocaine or heroin or something like that. And now, without a doubt, I think it's alcohol and just the effects that it has on people's families. At the very beginning of every single semester, I hand out a drug use survey to my students to complete anonymously, and ask them every single drug they've ever done and if they've grown up with an addict in the family. And everyone's very honest because it's anonymous. And about 60% of my students have a close family member who's an addict. So it's a really personable class where people have shared some really amazing stories and challenges that they faced, and personal experiences. So I like teaching that class, even though it's not my favorite subject matter. Next is Human Growth and Development, which is one of the ugliest covers I've ever seen. Sorry, whoever designed this. And it's just about everything from literally birth to death and how children learn and grow and how people develop personalities. It's another fun class because everyone has experience growing and developing, so everyone's really talkative in that class. And my favorite by far is General Psychology. This book and this class, we go over everything. Some of their homework assignments I have them do is a dream journal. They have to analyze their own dreams, kind of a Freudian thing. Yes, I know it's not scientific, but it's something fun, and it gets them looking at dreams. And we talk about lucid dreaming, which is a great technique if you haven't heard of it. We have a body language assignment where I teach them how to read body language, and they have to go out into a public place and try to observe people's body language for 20 minutes. We also look at micro expressions. And we watch tons of great documentaries on like the Jonestown Massacre and the Zimbardo prison experiment and everything. I mean, just the class is amazing. And so what I love teaching in general is that I get to talk about things that I love with people who I almost consider to be my friends. I mean, I don't, because that's not professional. I don't hang out with any of my students on the weekends, even though I do sometimes run into them, and that's always, really awkward and fun. And I always tell them to call me Erica unless they see me out in public, and then it's Professor House because I want to impress my friends. But I love teaching because it's just such an interesting class and such interesting topics. The things that I don't like about teaching, because people always ask me, what is it really like to be a teacher, is that it takes a lot of energy. A whole lot of energy. I mean, most people have normal jobs where, like, if you're not feeling it that a day, you can go in and kind of half-ass it. And I can't do that in front of a classroom, especially when I teach often night classes, which are 3 hours long. Like, I'm getting ready to go to class right now, and if you can't tell by the lighting, it's getting dark out, and I get to go teach for 3 hours. So it's really, really tiresome. And I've been fortunate enough to date people in the past and to have friends who have also taught, and nobody understands it unless you've done it yourself. Like, you have to get a lot of energy to teach, and then once you get done teaching and you come home, it takes me a while to really decompress, because imagine giving a presentation for 10 minutes to a group of people. Most people already would be deathly afraid. Now imagine doing that for 3 hours. I'm not nervous anymore like I used to be, although I still occasionally break out in hives because I'm just, obviously a dork. But it can be exhausting. And the other thing that people always ask me is like, well, what if they ask you something and you don't know the answer? And I tell them I don't know the answer. At the beginning of the semester, I tell my students, I'm not an expert at all, and please feel free to challenge me anytime that you think it's appropriate. But I'm here as a facilitator, really. Like, I have taught each of these classes, gosh, Gen Psych I've taught maybe 15 times now, so I'm an expert at Gen Psych, at least the material in the book. But oftentimes, students ask me questions in addition to what's in the book, which I love, and if I don't know, I tell them that. Or I tell them, I'm going to look into that. That's a really good question. I haven't thought of that. Or I'll ask for other students' opinions. So, I don't know. Being a teacher for so many years, like, I've told my students this year, like, they are really getting the benefit of my prior years of teaching, because I was not terrible, but it was just, I was so nervous that I wasn't really dynamic like I am now. And, if you look at my ratings on Rate My Professor, students tend to like me because I think I'm very approachable, I'm very honest. I bend over backwards for my students. Like, I will go above and beyond for my students, and I think that they know that. I hope that they know that. So I don't know. I love teaching. It has its challenges. The schedule's kind of crazy. The pay's not great as an adjunct. Never knowing what I'm going to teach next semester isn't fun. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. Like, it brings me so much joy to be able to, I don't know, share interesting news with people and see light bulbs, literally. Like, yesterday's lecture, I looked out in my class, and, there's a couple people sleeping, which is totally normal, but about half the class was literally, like, sitting here, obviously engaged in the conversation and just nodding their heads and asking questions, and that's why I do it. I mean, if there's just one student in the classroom who gets it, I'm getting teary-eyed. The kind of emails that I have received from my students who have thanked me at the end of the semester for being the best teacher that they've ever had, or inspiring them to go into psychology, like, that's why. That's why I do this, and I love it. So if you ever think about teaching, I would encourage you to do so. Yeah, it's gonna suck for a couple weeks if you're not, really comfortable talking in public, but it'll be so worth it to get over it. And the fear that I have challenged and conquered of speaking in public has helped me in job interviews. It's made me feel comfortable to go speak at FitBlogging in June. Like, I'm really, really glad of this opportunity. So I'm done rambling. If you have any questions about the classes I teach, ask me, particularly the themes that we talk about in this class. I'm going to start talking a lot more on my blog about it. I have so many amazing ideas because everything's related. Mental health, emotional health, weight, psychology, depression, anxiety, food cravings, it's all related. So I'm really, really excited, and I thank you for listening to me today.